Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist/secular/awesome community. My name is Zach Law, and this is episode number 111, and I'm recording live on September 14th, 2017. I would like to thank last week's guest, Nobody. Sorry, I took a week off. Completely my fault, but now that I'm pushing booking duties to my one beta listener, Jeannie Eichard, it'll be her fault from now on. So thank you to Aiden McCool of the Four Trans Men podcast for being on 2 weeks ago and being cool and all that. So tonight, we're bringing on Michael Schaffer, who is not afraid to be reasonable. Reasonable Risk just celebrated its 10th episode. Funny how our most recent interviews covered the McCool clan. He talks to himself and special guests weekly. I should try that sometime. Welcome aboard.
Hey, how are you, Zach?
Quite good. Let's see. So these are kind of beers that have been sitting around for a while, but I have a from Abita, the Tugoza, which is a key lime goza, which has a little salt to it.
In a long time. There was one beer that they had that I drank pretty regularly, but I'm in Colorado, so we have a brewery, at least one on every corner. So today I've got a Colorado Kolsch, which is from a brewery down in Durango, Steamworks Brewery, and I actually was just down there, went to the brewery. The restaurant was amazing too. Good food, good beer, and I'm a light style beer guy. I like Kolsch's, I like Pilsners. I'm not a bitter beer guy.
Yeah, the IPA is not really my style. And a beer I got when I was in Florida from Funky Buddha called Pineapple Beach. It's kind of a blonde ale with pineapple, and that'll be the backup. You always have to have a Derringer in your boot, and that for me is a beer.
Not a lot of good things come out of Florida, so
Funky Buddha is a good one. So we start with our out of context quotes that I got from listening to your show. So let's throw those out there.
Oh, I am eager to see what you found.
I lit a whole bunch of shit on fire. Don't do dumb shit. That sounds like some old-fashioned homespun bullshit.
Yeah, I don't recall what I was talking about when I was talking about lighting shit on fire. And I don't recall if that was metaphorical or literal, and it could be either.
It might have been episode 1 or 2, and you're talking about, I think, a chemistry class you took.
Oh, yeah. I think that was actually episode 1. Oh, yeah, I was a fucking disaster. We can swear on the show, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
No, we drink, but we don't curse on this show. What are you talking about?
Never
Professionals.
I don't know if there's legalities with the whole... I mean, I don't do live. I'm not this is a whole new world to me, live.
I like to keep people on the edge. No, you would actually talk about this on your show, but so what's your personal, religious background?
Actually, it's funny because I was listening to your show today with Sharon Frankel from Habeas Humor, and I've been on Sharon's show too, and I'm friends with Sharon. So we both grew up Jewish, and I actually the sort of I don't know if we even call ourselves ex-Jews. I mean, I don't. We're just you're Jewish. Eli Bosnick. He's Jewish. He's an atheist, but he's Jewish. We're all Jewish. So the upbringing was not unlike what Sharon talked about as far as being really it's just not a theological religion at the levels that most people travel in. I mean, there are the people that all they do is study the Torah, and I mean, they're insane, but that's a really small part of it. So I went to Hebrew school, which sucked. I mean, everybody hates Hebrew school. We go we went 2 or 3 times a week. And I remember there was one teacher that I actually liked. And he kind of did the Bible stories kind of thing. That was sort of his thing. It was just telling the stories. And he was a great storyteller. And most modern Jews view all of it as parable. Maybe not some of the pieces. I mean, I think most Jews probably do think that the Exodus story was maybe not literal. I mean, it's not a group that thinks the 10 plagues were literal, but they do think that the Hebrews were slaves in Egypt, which isn't supported by archaeology. But really, it's cultural. It's about foods and traditions, and it's really not so much about God. You read prayers. Sometimes you read what they mean in English. Sometimes you just recite them, and it's just sort of some repetition, and you get the Jewy chachamam, and that's actually what Hebrew sounds like. So I didn't really have a deconversion. I went through up to age 13. I had my bar mitzvah. I collected and cashed the checks. I didn't actually set foot in another synagogue except for relatives' bar mitzvahs ever. I haven't ever since then. And it's not like anyone in my family cares particularly. There's a lot of my wife isn't Jewish. There's a lot of other people in the family that have not married Jews or are not practicing anymore. It's not really a big thing in my family. The twist on it being, and this more from a family standpoint than a personal religion standpoint, but it's just kind of interesting. My dad grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, as a part of an observant Jewish family. You wouldn't think there's a lot of Jews in Tennessee, and there aren't. But in various places, and like my sister's ex-husband was from Savannah, Georgia. In these places like this, they have small but really tight Jewish communities. So if I run across somebody that grew up in Memphis and was Jewish, they will know my relatives. I mean, just 100%. There's no way they would not know my cousins. So I didn't grow up there. I grew up in Chicago, but had basically the same sort of modern. We actually went to what was called a conservative synagogue, but isn't. It's not what we think of as conservative. It's in between what's called Reform, which is where they do everything in English. It's sort of the loosest and most liberal. It's one step beyond that, but it's mainly a step beyond that in terms of ritual. So theologically, I never really thought about it much. In college, I did the be a big thinker thing for a few minutes, and I took survey of Western religions, survey of Eastern religions, mainly because I've always had an interest in it, from a standpoint of sociology and psychology. Psychology of belief, I think, is fascinating. And so I got into religion from a sort of a layman educational standpoint. And I think at that point, for a while, I considered myself a deist. Now it's sort of a halfway measure. But I've been, whether I called myself agnostic or I probably started calling myself atheist mid-2000s. And actually, I think that I probably started calling myself an atheist after I very randomly met him at Meta. This was 2004, 2005. It was before he wrote his first book, and happened to meet this guy, this kid. Really, I mean, he was really young at the time. Through work, this was when I was working in Hollywood, and that was actually my first exposure to that there existed something that was not organized atheism, just a community. I had no idea that even existed. I figured, you're an atheist. You just, they're just, you don't do anything with religion. So that was then when I started thinking more in that direction, and then eventually found more of the community and started to identify with atheism.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of no, here that go. Weird. I love sound. Anyway, I haven't had a lot of Jewish guests on the show, so what's interesting about that?
There aren't a lot of Jews.
Yeah, but
there used to be more. I don't know. I know.
It
happened like in the 40s, 30s, 40s.
Can't prove more. What's interesting about the whole religious setup is that the Christians and the Mormons and the Muslims and everybody has stolen the Jewish story.
Of course,
the Jewish people stole it from people before them, and they want to kill all the Jews. It's like part of their holy book. But why can't they take after the Jewish people in terms of, like, no one calls himself a cultural Christian and no one calls himself a cultural Muslim, because you can't do that. But when you say you're Jewish, there was a whole thing with David Silverman about, like, how Jewish people who are atheists should stop calling themselves Jews. And it's like, I don't think people are going to do that.
I'm not sure that there aren't. I mean, I haven't actually heard of this, and I haven't heard someone put it that way. But I think that there may be cultural Muslims out there, and that we may start to see more of that as more young people from, oh, great, I'm just bashing the microphone around here. That's fantastic. I'm professional, real professional. I think that we will see, in a sense, more cultural Islam, especially as more moderate and younger people that have grown up Muslim, they're abandoning their faiths in the same way that Christians and Jews and everyone else is, as far as younger people in this country, but besides the evangelicals, that they're a little different. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm hearing video game sounds. Just make me think I'm listening to one of your shows.
That's my notification tone. Would be the that would be the Donkey Kong Jumpman sound. So that would be when Mario, who was not called Mario at the time, jumps. That would be that sound. I am a vintage video game nerd, so
we will, of course. That's on the question list.
Excellent.
We'll get to the old school games and maybe how much reasonable risk you want to make to buy my Nintendo Classic System from me. But we're not there yet.
Interesting proposition.
Because we want to start from the top. When I interview a podcaster or an author or anybody who creates content, we want to start with that content. So we're going to, I would say we, there's just one person here. And I don't have multiple personalities.
I do it too. And I do it, I do it with podcasting. I do it with my business. I mean, which both of them are solo enterprises. But we sounds good. So I like the royal we. And the name of a pretty good Silver Song pickups tune.
I ain't heard them in a long time. So reasonable risk.
Mm-hmm.
How did this podcast get started? How did the journey begin?
Oh, let's see the journey. I should probably go back a little bit into um, just my introduction to podcasts in general, because every podcaster starts by hearing a podcast and then getting hooked on the format. It's a new media form that has really changed a lot, as far as being able to do it with very minimal investment and that sort of thing. So I started listening to podcasts in again about the mid 2000s, and I really started getting into that when I was um, playing professional poker, or small time. I mean, I was not like millions on the table, um, because there were a lot of poker podcasts coming out at the time. This was in
Yeah, anytime you mention poker, I have to put on the sunglasses. Like what
yeah,
were the mirrored sunglasses the guy had with the dinosaur eyes that were sticking out? Was that Moneymaker? Sorry,
ridiculous. That's Greg Raymer, who has
and it reflects the light, so I will not keep them on. For people who are listening, you're totally missing out on a great sight gag. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. Podcasts are a fantastic visual medium too. So I started listening to podcasts then, mostly poker specific podcasts. And that almost in some ways like the world that we travel in of sort of atheist and skeptical communities and groups. It was very similar to that. There was, there were online communities, there were groups, there were feuds, there were fights, there was, all the same drama. And that played out through a lot of podcasts too. From there, I started listening to sort of the biggies, This American Life, Left, Right, and Center from KCRW in LA. That was one of the first ones that hooked me on political podcasts. And then from there, over time, I would say I stopped listening to the poker podcast, but all of them pretty much died and went away once a lot of money came out of that economy as the result of legal issues. So from there, let's see. I honestly could not tell you how I first came upon an atheist podcast, and I'm pretty sure it was Cogdis. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that was like one of the first ones. Which, wow, I mean, talk about getting thrown right into it.
Yeah, they've been going back a while. I haven't reached out to interview them because I think it'd be interesting to get. Because when I interviewed with Scathing, it was like I went back to episode 1. And Cogdis goes back even further, I think.
It goes back.
I mean, they're on episode 377, and I don't think they did 2 a week.
Are they?
At the beginning. Maybe
Tom never seems to know.
Yeah, they make up for that. Like, I wouldn't even know if I listened. But
it's so for whatever reason, I stumbled upon Cognitive Dissonance, and I grew up in Chicago, so that was part of me, listening to Tom and Cecil. I was like, oh, these are totally like, these are the guys that I know from growing up in the Chicago area. And, we would have the same, fights about who makes the best Italian beef sandwich. I mean, that's a common conversation in Chicago. Everybody's had it dozens of times, and we never get bored of it. Never. So
have you had the Chicago versus New York pizza argument that
it's not even
ongoing
argument. They're not the same food. They're just not the same food. I mean, Chicago,
they're called the same thing. That's about it.
Chicago pizza is this creation of just buttery crust. It's, and the New York pizza, this floppy pizza. I mean, I like New York pizza as, it's food. It's, most of it's not, it's good. I like pizza, but it's not like anyways, I could go on forever. Uh, so from there, I started to find all of the other atheist podcasts that they would have people come on their show, and I, heard about scathing, and then all of the various world that comes out of there. And started listening to Seth Andrews, started listening to everybody's favorite podcaster, David Smalley. And
I know there's some names now that you say, and it's like instantly, whoa, you're controversial.
You know what? I'm not blocked, and I'm trying to get blocked.
There was a point, actually, the whole out of context quote started with me out of context quoting Dogma Debate, and then I met him at ReasonCon 3 years ago, and he wanted me to like send him the audio and stuff. But yeah, I kind of stopped listening, and it's not gone well lately. I'll just say that.
It's yeah. Well, I've had a little bit of fun. And I think I've only done it a couple of times so far, and we'll see how long it lasts before I get blocked. But I use hashtag sharing for the blocked when he's, and I suppose I could use it for anybody. And anybody, join in when you see
stirring shit to get fans.
People that tends to block a lot of people. Sharing for the blocked. That's and then post it somewhere. Because I like all the thousands of people to see what they can't see. So at that point, I started thinking about doing a podcast. I've always been, not always, but I've spent a lot of time adjacent to creative people. Not being a creative myself, but working with creatives. When I was in Hollywood, that was what I was doing. I was working with writers and producers. And so I've done a lot close to creative, but I haven't created myself. And maybe I play in a band, but we only do covers, so that's not really creating. So I had this thought of wanting to do so. I was like, this is a medium that I can do something with. I feel confident enough to be able to do something in an audio medium. You won't see me doing a whole lot of video. So this is a special treat.
That's right, people. Soak it in.
Yeah, exactly. Bask.
That's YouTube people, the podcast people. Well, for the YouTube channel, you can see him. He's,
I'm
in a class beer.
Look right here, tasty white guy. So then from there, it was a matter of, okay, what is it? What is this show? It needs to be something, and I'm not funny enough to do a comedy podcast, but I hope people laugh at some things when they listen to my show. I feel like a lot of the atheism stuff, it's either been said or there are other people that say it way better than I do. It's not, I haven't studied enough to do that. I'll let Seth and Matt Dillahunty and all of those guys take on those arguments. That's not for me. So it really wasn't until I heard opening arguments that it clicked. And I think, I referred to that show as, that's the show that's going to launch 1,000 podcasts, because it did something different. It took somebody that we already knew. That was a big part of it, was that the community already knew Thomas and had some exposure to Andrew through Thomas's show. But it took the viewpoint of skepticism and the viewpoints of liberalism too, and social justice as well. All of those points that I think define the part of the community that I'm interested in being in. I mean, we're seeing fractures, obviously. That's the part of the community that I consider myself a part of and want to be a part of. So melding that with something that is outside of that but has relevance to it. So Andrew and Thomas took the law, something that crosses over into everybody's lives, but everybody doesn't think about it every day. But everyone would be better off, I think. And I listen to their show religiously. I mean, I listen to every episode, and I learn something. And so they have done something that brings something educational. It's a lot of fun, and it has a viewpoint, but it's also not afraid to challenge any viewpoints and to say, okay, but there are things called facts, and there are certain ways that things work. And even if we don't like those, we need to acknowledge them to be able to make progress. And so when they came out with that show, it kind of spoke to me as I have some experiences, and I through both education and career, that I can bring to the table, meld with the viewpoints of the community that I am a part of, and put something out that hopefully people can learn some things from that are actually just applicable in their regular real life, and bring some of the voices from the community out. And so what I determined was that thing, and really what the foundational principle of the show of reasonable risk, it's all based on one concept, that for any decision, there are two things to determine. You determine the risks and you determine the rewards, and that tells you what the decision should be. We don't always know what the risks are. We don't always know what the rewards are. There's a lot of uncertainty. So we're never going to make all of the perfect decisions. But I think if people make better decisions overall, it improves their lives. And hopefully, if one person starts making better decisions and the next person does, hopefully that filters out, and we don't have fucking idiots voting for Donald fucking Trump.
True. Well, we have actually passed the usual time for the live read one, but so we're going to do a little bit of a pause, which means instead of me drinking while I'm listening to you talk, you get to drink while listening to me talk.
Well, I just popped open another. So
I think that's a win-win right there. This is a weird story because usually live reads I talk about people who follow me or people I listen to. I want to talk about something that happened to me. So a person I never met had a funeral on Monday. So this is unexpected, seeing as this was my wife's dad. My wife hadn't talked to him in 22 years, and he committed suicide last week. So let's call this whole event the king of awkward gatherings. We went to the typical humble, giant Southern Baptist / Methodist / Weverist church and witnessed a church service with the dead mentioned the way I slipped my guest's name into my canned final couple of sentences in the show. So my takeaway from that experience was, number one, don't do that to anyone. Number two, do whatever the fuck you want to do with me. Just if you bring in a canned minister to talk about how I was the life of the party, please rush the pew. Come after him. So after this service was over, my parents were there. It was an odd weekend because I was already going to be in Nashville, and this thing happened in Nashville. So my wife and I happened to be together and got away from the hurricane in Atlanta. So much in one story. But so after this service was over, my parents I'm going to call them the rhino version of Catholic. Like they all go to Catholic church, but they're not very serious about it. They were very mad at this minister because the minister told the story of the dead man, but it didn't mention my wife, his only child. So they both approached him and kind of brought my wife along. And so my dad basically came up to this minister, slapped him on the shoulder, and basically said, "Hey, that life of the party dude, this is his daughter, and you should meet her." And so she, he made a little mumble about, moving on from the past and going on to the future, and literally ran up the stairs and never was to be seen again. So that was my little story from reality from this week, and the kind of mixes I occasionally get with religion in my life. I just want to make sure that my guest is still there because I haven't seen Michael in a while.
I am here.
Okay.
I was just muting myself through your story. And actually, okay, so I know that there's not generally post live read commentary, but can I ask you something?
Sure.
So, because I have not had a ton of funeral experience, but it was about let's see, so it was almost 2 years ago. My mom died, and so we had did the whole meet with, and I mean, of course, this was a Jewish funeral, so it's a little bit different, but it's not totally different. And so we had met with the officiant, or whatever you call them. I don't know what you call this person, and kind of went through like, what are you going to say? What should you say? That sort of thing. Was there anybody that instructed him as far as what to talk about? Or I don't even know if it works that way in Christian funerals, or if the minister just gets up and platitudes around.
Well, the widow, I think, was probably the one, because that was the church I went to. Although my wife later was like, I don't think this is the kind of service he would have wanted, but he killed himself last week, so pretty much whatever he wanted was kind of out of the picture.
Right.
Because I'm guessing there wasn't like, I'm just assuming in the suicide note you don't usually mention like, well, here's how I want to be buried. He did choose to be cremated, but other than that, we didn't actually see her. We kind of got there a little bit late, and we were running into a bunch of relatives who hadn't seen my wife in 15, 20, well, 22 is the number I heard a lot. Basically the entire family was cut off.
Oh wow.
It didn't go well, the relationship between them, because they got divorced at age 2. So her father-in-law is her real dad. It's just, this is the biological person that was connected. And so
when your wife was 2, not when they were 2, because that would be tough.
Correct.
See,
you got to be correct. I mean, we're in the South, but it's not quite like that here.
I mean, that's ambitious.
But other thing happened is, so we're riding home, and this is something that was on my mind, but I didn't think it would be a good idea to bring it up. But the whole topic of suicide came up, and I just said, like, this was a very religious service. Isn't it a Christian thing that if you commit suicide, you go to hell? And my dad was like, laughed at that, like, like, that's hilarious. That's a crazy concept. And I'm like, I know I can find plenty of places in the Bible where it says you go to hell. Well, it has to be New Testament because it was Sheol before. The Jews were nice, man. They had this like sort of temporary, sort of bad place.
I don't even know what the Jews have. As a putatively a Jew, I've always found it interesting with so the Jewish religion has a law about who's Jewish. If your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. That's how it works. It's a maternal line, and it doesn't matter what you believe or anything like that. You're just, hey, your mom was Jewish, you're Jewish. And I've always kind of grappled with that as far as how this group self-defines who is in their group. They will continue to define someone, even if somebody says, hey, I reject Judaism completely. Be like, yeah, but you're still a Jew, boy, chick. You're still a Jew. You know, I mean, they would. I mean,
check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
That's exactly right. And the other thing that Jews don't do is Jews do not want to convert you. They do not proselytize. They don't want new members. It is, you're Jewish because you were born Jewish. And if you were, they want you to be more Jewish. But if you weren't, they could give a fuck. You're not the basically, in a way, you can't convert into being a chosen person. It's allowed. It can be done. It's fucking difficult. And people do it generally for marriage. I mean, that's usually the reason why people convert to Judaism. I mean, Ivanka Trump converted to Judaism for, that fine piece of man, Jared Kushner. So it's just an interesting difference between proselytizing religions and non-proselytizing.
So you mean that character on Seinfeld that Bryan Cranston played that was the dentist that converted for jokes?
Bastard.
Just that's a lie. It's a lie from the pit of hell.
Wally.
We're still in the middle of your questions about your show. We have other things to talk about. We got to keep going this. We're still reasonable risk. We're back to reasonable risk.
You go everywhere. I
give everywhere, man. Yeah, I know. We kind of did the elevator pitch, but so for this show, it's just you, right? And where are you located?
I am in the Denver area, so I'm in the suburbs, but essentially Denver. I've been here I lived here for a few years in the late 90s. And then I came back from LA. I lived in LA from 2000 to 2008 and then came back to Colorado. And I love Colorado. This state is, I mean, it's just gorgeous. The weather is amazing. We've got excellent local brews. We have legal recreational pot. It's a really great state. I mean, very low on the natural disasters scale. Not that I actually worry about that stuff, but what's interesting about where I live in the area is that I'm basically on the border of red and blue as far as political affiliations go. And I'm across that line into red territory. So the suburb that I live in is in Douglas County, which is just south of Denver and like 30 minutes from downtown Denver. But Douglas County is actually something that people should be paying attention to this fall, because we have a school board election here that is, we've had this school board that's been Koch brothers funded now for 8 years. This year, we finally have the opportunity to actually turn it. This is going to be the most expensive school board election probably in the history of the country. And ALEC, which is it's like the American Legislative Exchange Council. This is basically the people that come up with the worst fucking laws you can imagine and then get them out to every state. And so all of your abortion clinic restriction law, they all come from this group. They're all focused on getting the school district that my kids are in, Douglas County School District in Colorado, to stay pro voucher, they want to call it choice, but what they really want to do is
school money.
They want to give religious schools money. And they've taken this voucher case twice to it's going to be going to the Supreme Court again. And
you have Colorado's own Neil Gorsuch in there now.
Oh, what a fucker. I mean,
yeah, you have what is it, Gordon Klingenschmidt? I don't think he's in.
He's not in anymore. He's down.
He's kind of radio guy, but it's in the state. Yeah, it's
so he's down in the Springs, which is Colorado Springs is actually one county south of me. It's about 40 minutes away. Colorado Springs is the craziest fucking place in the world. Because it has this mix of different
your Rams, baby,
different places and people, and you should have Ari Stillman come on and tell you all about Colorado Springs.
Well, I had Ari on, but it was before the move. Yeah,
they just came out here.
Y'all move. So you all met in person, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun because we got to it happened to be the night of Chris's podunk anniversary.
The one where I was super drunk. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, and I realized when I listened to it later that it was very hard to hear us. We were mic'd for recording my show, and then we kind of went and just said, okay, let's call
the studio. Yeah, I just remember seeing Chris and Ari. So yeah, I'm sorry, I missed John. Chris.
Oh, I was.
Do you know who I am? You haven't done that yet. Come on.
I didn't really at the time, actually. I heard about you really through Chris.
Well, it's good because I've given Chris a lot of damn beer, including this weekend. Man, whew, that boy can put it down.
I can imagine. Hey, Chris, someday we're gonna be in the same room, and
it's not like I set it up to happen this way, but I've seemed like every time I see Chris, I end up giving him beer, and yeah, came in. I was in Nashville last weekend and was going to Titans game on Sunday, and on Saturday I said, come on over, and I had all these bombers, and we ended up going through like 4 of them, and we actually fell asleep, and I guess he finished drinking whatever's left and snuck out. But yeah, once I was out of beer, he was like, okay, done with y'all.
Okay, well, we've drained that, and there's no more reason to stay.
So the format of your show, has it really changed since the beginning? Because at first you were kind of just, angry man yelling at clouds about risk, and then you started doing interviews. So what's
I didn't know what the fuck
what's the format of the show? Well, nobody does.
Well, exactly, nobody does. And I really didn't know what it was going to end up being. I didn't expect it to end up being as much of an interview-based show as it's become. And when I say become, I mean I've released 10 episodes. It's not like this show is not
welcome to double digits.
Yeah, exactly. Woo! Hey, extra meaning because it ends with a 0. Well, love how our base 10 math system gives us things to celebrate for no reason. So it has changed already. It's going to continue to change. I think every show does. Every show changes and morphs. So where we are right now, and I'm pretty stable, I think, with what the format is, and I'm definitely stable on the release schedule, which originally I was going to do every 2 weeks, and then I thought, oh, maybe I'll do something little in between, and then I realized that wasn't. I wanted to have some consistency. I wanted to put out something good that was consistently what people want. Well, hell, I don't know what people want, but tell me. Listen, tell me what you want. And so what we do is I'm generally, I have a few different recurring segments, and so they're not in every episode. Each episode might have different segments. It's usually going to have 2 segments and an interview. And so the segments that I've introduced so far are one is called Get the Fuck Out of Here. And that's where I'm choosing a news article, or it might be a blog post, or hell, I think last week it was a Facebook fight, where I'm going in and I'm picking things apart. But what I'm trying to do with it really is to show people how to critically think about something that they're reading online, whatever it is. Just like Andrew on Opening Arguments wants people to be able to pull up a legal case and be able to read it and understand it. I want people to be able to think through, whatever shit they saw on the internet. Before you hit the share button, I'd love it if people took 3 seconds to think about if it even made any sense at all. So that's one of my regular segments, is Get the Fuck Out of Here, and it's just about calling out bullshit. I also do a negotiation school. That comes from, negotiation is one of my favorite things. Most people say, oh, the worst thing I could ever do is go buy a used car. I'm like, oh, fucking let me at them. I love nothing better than to go buy a car or something and have to, I mean, not have to, but negotiate that out in a way that I think that I'm getting not even necessarily the better of a deal. You don't have to get the better of a deal in a negotiation. If everyone can win, fantastic. It's not negotiations are generally not a zero-sum game, which I think our president thinks they are, but they don't have to be. So that's another regular segment, is my negotiation school. And oh geez, what else do I do? Oh, sometimes I have a segment that's just called Now You're Just Doing Random Crap, and that's what it is. It's, maybe I want to muse about something. Okay, what the fuck? It's my show. I'll do it. So I did a thing about the eclipse. I had gone, so I'm about, let's see, maybe 2-3 hours south of where the totality of the eclipse was. And so we went up to see it, and I did a random crap segment where I recorded my thoughts on the whole phenomenon of, the whole media circus and all of that with regard to this eclipse. And so I recorded before going, and then I recorded after seeing it, after the totality, and what changed. And that was kind of fun. So I don't know, I might do more things like that, but it is evolving. And then the main chunk right now of the shows has been interviews that they can go a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's about a person's personal story. It's about challenges, risks they've faced, decisions they've made. And a lot of times that's because of what they've chosen to do. Like, so yesterday's episode had Marissa McCool on, and she faces risks as a trans activist, as being outspoken and being out there. And there are rewards in that, in the things that she sees as a result when she gets emails from, whether it's kids or even adults that are helped by what she's doing. So there's different risks and rewards. Don't have to be financial. They're in all sorts of different areas. So with my guests, sometimes it's more personal stories, and sometimes it's experts talking about specific things within their area of expertise. A couple, let's see, last week I had a forensic psychologist on who does court cases, who works with sex offenders, with in parole hearings, things like that, as a very different perspective on risks of recidivism and things like that. And then next week, I've got Andrew Torres coming on to talk about. We recorded a couple days ago, actually, so I know what it's going to end up being. But
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. So we talk a lot about the indie podcasting business and how creatives can go through that business, some risks or challenges that they might face, with regard to small business people that work in the gig economy, people that are creatives, and specifically podcasting. So it goes in a lot of different directions. The common thread is always, to me, the common thread is decision making.
Well, I do want to pause too. We're about 50 minutes in, so live read 2 is a little bit late now. No religion required, since they are a patron of this show. I usually give them love. They're taking a bit of a break. I think they escaped the storm. So I'm going to say something new that I discovered today that everybody should support. Go to Facebook. I'll include links in the show notes. The Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative, which is led by 2 all-stars, Callie and Marissa. And I just looked at the number of podcasts that Marissa had. She just had Marissa on. It's like 5 podcasts. It's insane. And not only that, when I interviewed Marissa, she was on like 7 shows that week, and probably the same at you. So it's like, man, it's hard to break in there. But
I don't know how she does it and how Callie does it,
and like goes to school.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because they did just come out and kind of make their official announcement today. And I mean, I'm 100% with them. Ari Stillman edits my show. Ari is a part of that network. It's a really good thing.
It's a heck of a network. And I think I'm going to have to arm wrestle Chris to who actually gets to interview them first. But I'm guessing he'll probably be first, because that's just the way it goes. I do have a guest for next week, so we'll see. So how many jobs have you had in
Colorado Coal?
Oh, look at you. Like, you might be the second, third guest ever to drink more than me during a show. That's crazy.
Well,
if you've ever met the 4 Wrath crew, they're in Wyoming.
I haven't.
Heavily.
Hopefully I will, because I know they're not that far away. I think they're in Laramie, and fuck if I know how far away
that exists. Yeah.
Everything out here is fucking far from one thing to another, and I'm not a big driving road trip kind of person, so I have the farthest that we've gone, like as a family, on like a driving road trip was Omaha, which is about 8 hours. That is my fucking limit. If it's going to be more than 8 hours, I'm flying or I'm not going.
You've been a man of many hats. How many jobs have you had, and are you in witness protection?
How many jobs have I had? Shit. I have no idea how many jobs that I've had. I can tell you how many careers that I've had, and I've had a few more jobs than careers, but not that much more. Exactly. So it's taken me a long time to figure out what to be when I grew up. I'm 42 now, so I don't think I'm quite old people yet, hopefully, but I'm older than a lot of the podcast community. I mean, a lot of the podass?
Not me, I'm 43.
Community, is pretty young. You're 43. Nice. Okay, that's good. Mm-hmm. We've got, I like when people, older. That's great.
Respect your elders.
Makes me feel, but I'm young at heart. So what did you ask?
Well, just during the course of your show, I've
careers. Okay.
That you have been an agent of many kinds, like a literary agent, a
Different. Yes. Okay.
Yes, and
Um,
poker, of course, which you mentioned earlier, but
so
you had a nice little poker period of your life.
I'll do a little a quick chronology. So I graduated from I went to Indiana University, got a business degree, finance, boring, normal, which was, I mean, that was me at the time. I was not, I didn't challenge things so much. That came much later. So I worked in a finance job. It was actually, I mean, it was kind of fun. I had clients that were high risk borrowers. So, like the first finance company I worked for, the general rule of thumb was we can make enough money if the company is in existence for 6 months from the time we make the loan. Even if we have to liquidate them after that, we're fine. So my first introduction to career life actually was one of my first introductions to kind of high risk situations, which everything I've done has built in some way. So I was lending to companies that were, and I mean, I was a low level nothing, but so I was doing loans to companies that were generally in trouble in some way, or they wouldn't have needed to pay the rates that we charged. And it wasn't like payday lending. I mean,
It was like, you breaking some knees here? What's happening?
it wasn't like that. I mean, it was a major company. The company's still around there. You know, there was nothing illegal or untoward about it. It just happened to be more expensive loans. And it was that they were collateral based loans. So basically the company didn't have to be making money. We were looking at what are their accounts receivable and what are their inventory? What can we sell it for? And that's how much money we can. That would be my Pugamo. He'll probably stop in a couple minutes. So that was really the first kind of high risk area that I was in. And no, really, they'll stop in a minute. So it was interesting. And some of the companies that I worked with actually are companies you would know. And the one at the time, and I mean, they've been through a million owners since then, and so it doesn't matter. I can talk about it. The North Face was one of my customers. And, they were actually, everybody was wearing North Face jackets then, but man, was the company in trouble. So from there, I worked for a few different banks. I decided that was just not right for me. So what I did was I needed a way to find legitimate unemployment, which meant going to graduate school for me. So I was interested in, like I said, I've always had an interest in creative areas. I've been playing music since high school and just always liked creative endeavors, but I'm not necessarily that creative myself. So I decided to go to USC in LA to get my MBA, which would be useful wherever. And it's a good business school. It's a top 25 school, or it was at the time. I don't know where it is now. But they also had a business of entertainment program. So I said, okay, I can go. I'll get my MBA, had a marketing concentration, and I've got this opportunity to learn about the entertainment business and the film business. And so when I was there, I did a couple of internships. I did one at Paramount. I did one at the agency that I ended up working for, which was International Creative Management. Actually, now they're called ICM Partners, but they're one of the big ones. There are, I think there's four like big, huge talent agencies, and they're one of them. So I ended up after business school going back to ICM and pushing a fucking mail cart. I mean, that's what you do. You are there in the mailroom with a. So I was, let's see, I was 28, 29 at the time. So you're there in the mailroom and you get paid minimum wage. We did get overtime, so at least that was good. My cohort in the mailroom consisted of people that were either like me, maybe late 20s, just out of business school or just out of law school. Yeah, I mean, people that just came out of a good law school are going to work for, God, what was minimum wage back then? It was like $5 an hour. I mean, it was dirt nothing. And then it was also some kids just out of undergrad that were connected in some way, that had parents in the business, things like that, that had some other connection to get in. Because you know, when they say it's who you know, it's true to an extent. It is who you know. And who you know gets you to a certain place. But there are also ways to get to know those people who you should know. And so that's really what I did. I didn't know anybody in Hollywood. I didn't know anybody in the music business, in the film business, in any of that. But I went out there. Going through business school helped because I made a lot of connections that way. But then, you know, from there, it was about getting into this program, getting into an agent training program at one of the big agencies was a big deal, even though it paid shit. So I made agent pretty quickly. I think I made agent within 3 years, which is usually it takes people maybe 4 or 5 years to become an agent. So at that time, I was a literary agent. I was working with TV screenwriters, producers, and then I was also doing life story rights. And that's actually how I met Hemant, was through a life story rights thing. From there, I ended up taking this buyout. We had a merger. I took a buyout so that I didn't have to, I was kind of done with the business, kind of wanted to move back to Colorado. We're just about to have our first kid. Was ready to leave California. I knew that business wasn't going to be, it was a great experience. It wasn't going to be what was going to work for me long term. So I got paid for a while without working because I had a contract, and they were quite happy to break my contract and pay me out for it. It was actually it was a great conversation with, so one of the people that I was sort of a mentor at that time was the guy that ran TV for the agency, ran TV and International. And so I went in to talk to him. I said, look, I think I'm kind of done with the business. And what I literally said was, I know that my parking spot and my office are worth more right now than I am. So can you just go talk to them and say, hey, just pay Michael out, let him go. And so that's what happened. And so I got to take that time when I was getting a paycheck anyways without going to work. And I was getting into online poker at the time, and it was really big, and it was 2006. And I started making some money. And I said, well, what the fuck? I'll try it. I'll just sit at home and play poker all day. And so that's what I did. I never did spectacularly, but I made a living. And I started producing some poker training video series there were several companies that were doing that at the time. So I did a couple of series. I became a coach, which was basically just a, fee per hour kind of, people would hire me to teach them how to play poker, and we'd get on Skype, and I had clients all over the world. Actually, I had clients in weird places, China, Lebanon, all sorts of weird places. And how I made a living for a while that way. Poker crashed. I did a couple of startup ventures that didn't work. Ended up starting to invest in real estate with a partner. And from there, decided to kind of grow our business. And he was already a broker. So I joined him at the brokerage, started working with clients and buying and selling and that sort of thing. And just earlier this year, ended that partnership, created my own brokerage, Reason Real Estate, which is just me right now, and I expect to grow. But I don't want to manage 1 million people. That's just not fun. I'd like to do things more on my own, do things in my own way. So that's what got me here. And then somewhere along the way, I decided to do a podcast.
The greatest way to make a buck.
Yeah, there's so much money in podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're, well, there are ways to make money in podcasting. I was talking with Thomas Smith about you can make money in podcasting. You just have to do a 180 on your moral compass.
That is key. So you mentioned earlier you were an old school gamer. So are you sad you missed out on the NES Classic? And what are some of your music cues in your show are sounds from like Donkey Kong and Pac-Man. It's probably a trivia question to name them all, but what are the ones like, let's do the, if you're on a deserted island and you can only have one game, what would that be?
So I gravitate mostly towards arcade games of that era. I do like some of the home games. I have an Atari 2600 that is still working and hooked up. I could go play it right now. But I mostly really like the arcade games. So Donkey Kong was, that was sort of my game because, and actually this is funny, it ties into religion. It's kind of nuts. So the temple that we went to when I was a kid, and I would say that I was probably, 5th, 6th grade-ish, maybe at this point. So they did a fundraising auction, just like churches and temples do. They find stuff, auction it off, and so someone had donated a couple of stand-up arcade games, and so let's see, what year would this have been? It would probably have been around maybe, I'm gonna say 84, 85-ish. Donkey Kong came out in 81. So one of the games that they happened to have there was a fully functioning, perfect stand-up Donkey Kong arcade game. And I'm at this auction with my parents because they made me go to this auction with them. And I'm kind of, looking around. They're like, yeah, if you like anything, maybe we'll buy something. And I remember that, I never would have expected them to buy a full-size stand-up arcade game. I was just playing it. It was there. I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, Donkey Kong. No, normally I got to pay $0.25 to play this. So I'm playing the Donkey Kong machine, but I remember there was an Infocom text adventure game. And I loved text adventures on the old Apple, 2E, 2C. And so for all the people that don't know what that is, it's a game that all it is words, and you boot it up, it comes up with something. Actually, some of them just came up with a prompt, and you just had to figure out what the hell to put into the game to make it take you to the next place or whatever. So there was a game, and I was like, ooh, I want this, I'd like this game. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll see what it goes for. And then I didn't even know that they had ended up buying this Donkey Kong machine and brought it over to our house and somehow managed to get it into our basement. And so from then on, I was, and where I grew up, it wasn't that uncommon. I mean, I had friends that had arcade games in their basements too. It wasn't like it was crazy. But hell, I had a Donkey Kong machine, so that was my game. I'm not very good at it anymore, unfortunately. I played it a few months ago. I played at a vintage arcade, and I was not as good as I used to be. So someday I'll have another one.
Well, it takes a while because I got the NES version. At first, I couldn't make it past the first board, and then I realized. I mean, I don't know if the stand-up is the same, but it's like 3 boards, and you just rotate through them. Once you finish them, you just go back to the beginning.
Yeah, there's actually four. There's 4 boards total. There's the first red level, then there's the blue girder level, then there's the elevator level, and then there's the mud factory level. That would be Donkey Kong.
Factory. That's another name. So you have a current name for your studio, or are you searching for suggestions for a new name?
I am still searching. I've gotten a few good suggestions. So when Ari and Jeremiah, when Ari Stillman and Jeremiah Schrager were in studio, Ari dubbed it and I listened to it, and they dubbed it the risky hole, which obviously a glory hole takeoff, and for whatever reason, I always had risk hole in my head, which I do not want it to be the risk hole. So I've gotten a few suggestions. I'm still looking for them. So I've had a few good ones, but I don't really even have a real studio. I mean, it's my home office. but if anyone has any good names, yeah, go for it.
Me too. Yeah, that's where it is. Well, gosh, we're going way past an hour, which tends to happen these days. I don't know what it is. Everybody just, talks and talks and talks, which is okay because people like to listen. So before we go, is there anything else you want to cover? And of course, let everybody know where you can find your show. All the links will be in show notes, but it helps to say them too.
Yeah. I always wonder if I should bother with the time it takes to make those show notes, but the easiest place to find me is just go to reasonableriskpodcast.com. So of course, everything's there, RSS feeds and whatever, but I'm on iTunes, I'm on Stitcher, I'm on Google Play, all the podcasty places. You can find me. So that's, you can find me anywhere there. Twitter is @ReasonBroker. And then I've got a Facebook page, and I accept friend requests on Facebook too. If we've got enough mutual friends, I'll trust you. And then if you're an asshole, I'll drop you.
So you'll give you a fair shake. And I can actually announce that next week, Natalie Newell of the Science Enthusiast podcast, who I believe has had you on recently, will.
I haven't been on her show yet.
Be my guest.
Recorded
you're scheduled
yesterday. So she's your guest next week.
Yep. Thanks to my new underpaid booker. Yep. I got one for next.
Well, then I'm going to encourage everyone to listen because Natalie's a lot of fun and she's got a great project. So I actually just interviewed her yesterday, but that is not going to come out for a little while. I'm going to end up holding that until just before QED because I'm going out of town for like the first half of October. And so I'm just banking stuff right now. So don't expect much current events out of me. I don't do current events anyways. But if you do listen, listen to someone else for current events.
That's the advantage of the live show. I can't remember what I was talking about 2 days ago. So the shows that come out later in time, I'm like, I don't even have any idea. I'm like, I'm glad I'm still here. So that's really my idea.
Well, see, I kind of like that I don't hear my show. Well, I don't even hear the final version of my show because Ari edits. So I send it to Ari. Ari edits it. And then, so like the day before it's coming out, I'm actually hearing it. So it's like a whole new thing. I get to listen to my own show as if it's, just a show I listen to. It's kind of neat.
Perfect. Well, People who want to support this show, be like Bobby, Hugh, Teody, Marissa, and go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, Zachrilege. I can spell it after 2 beers, so can you. Follow me on Twitter. You can like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all, not hate mail, love mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. And if there's someone you know in this community, hey, it can be a religious person, whatever, send them my way and I'll bring them on for an interview because it's fun to do interviews. So thank you again to Michael for being on tonight. For the people listening / watching, stay safe. If you need to chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you are not alone. Reach out. Let's chat and get that human connectiveness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical. I love all y'all, and good night.